Hopefully, I'll keep this on so I'll notice if it decides to turn off.
Keep one eyeball on the waveform, so you don't have to edit it later.
Mm-hmm. 2 eyes, as often as I can spare them.
For keeping a close eye on Frodo, he spent a lot of time not looking at Frodo.
He immediately leaves and goes to Gondor.
Right.
Boy. Audibly does the hand-folded boy symbol.
Dad of Boy is coming to Steam at some point. Right?
Oh, yeah.
Yes, it is. And that right soon.
Wow.
When's it releasing?
I don't know.
I heard rumors that Spider-Man, the video game, is also coming out. The most recent one.
Huh.
So,
Or like, not the most recent one, but like
the PS4 one.
Correct.
Right?
Yep.
Okay.
And it's sort of a
it'll
similar
be
deal.
nice.
Because God of War was a PS4 exclusive too, initially.
Right. Except Sony now forgets what exclusive means.
Mm-hmm.
Unless they're talking about a collection of 2 Castlevania games from the 90s that is the only reason Nathan wants to buy a PS4.
Mm-hmm. Well, there's other things you can play on PS4.
I mean, there are, but I mean, Symphony of the Night is like the top of my list.
Mm-hmm.
It's followed by Spider-Man and Dad of Boy and some Dark Souls.
Bloodborne.
Yeah.
Which, rumor has it, may be coming to PC itself sometime in the near future.
Which, again, Sony, what you doing? You want people to buy your PS5, or you don't because they're not in stock at all? Of course, that might
Scalpers. Dingleberg.
One part scalpers, one part global chip shortage going on.
That sounds like a really crappy cocktail.
Global chip shortage?
Like one part scalpers, one part global chip shortage.
One part scalp.
Throw it in a
one part
blender,
chips.
shake it up, put some coconut shavings on there, and you got yourself a really crappy cocktail.
I
And
call
some
this
vodka.
the PS5.
Yeah, gosh, I don't think I've seen like a PS5 at Best Buy the one time I went to Best Buy in the last 6 months. And it was the display model, so it probably wasn't even real because somebody would have tried to steal it. It's well over a year since that and the Xbox, whatever it is, released.
One S.
Series X.
Series X, yeah.
It was when Xbox.
They should have gone with the much
exploded.
more conventional, like, intuitive naming convention of having the Xbox One be the 720 and the Series X being 1080, but
Or
they decided
4K.
not to make sense.
I feel like they asked like a Japanese anime creator to come up with the title for the Xbox.
Maybe it's the same guy that decided to call the revision, the handheld revision, the new Nintendo 2DS XL. Which is one of the 3DS models.
And here we have the word salad console of the day.
And Knuckles, featuring Dante from Devil May Cry.
Featuring rap songs by DaBaby. That's a conversation of which I only get echoes of whenever I check Twitter. In between screaming at my computer very silently so I won't disturb my coworker. It's funny because the way we're situated in the office, I can just sort of make out the corner of my eye when she's looking and when she's not. So I'll just be like, doing the classic face palm and face wipe audibly demonstrates. And the stress, that is the James stress position. And
He's assumed James' stress position.
And then like I'll see her start to turn and I'll sit up straight. She's like, and oh yes, just working through this InDesign layout here. Recently I haven't really had any like huge
You haven't had to
issues.
do Microsoft Publisher anytime recently?
Yes, thank the good Lord. There was one oh god, there was I've mostly expunged our system of the Horde program and the need for it. But one project, I think it was like a month ago, came up that was like the only file existing was publisher.
Mm-hmm.
So I just put it on one monitor, and the other monitor I reverse engineered it in Instagram, which would, or not Instagram, InDesign. That's the other app I use. InDesign, and it took like 15 minutes, and it probably would have been hours of internal screaming if I were to do it in Publisher, which is one of the worst programs to ever grace God's
Grace.
Okay, not grace. To ever
To stain the
to ever stain
visage.
the sweet soil that God placed on this good green earth.
I mean, weird coming from Microsoft, because Word and Excel are just fine. for the most
Word
part.
is great unless you try to do a text or to do a table or text box. Then it is a living hell.
Sure. But
That
if you're
is
trying to do a table, do it
It's
in
not what
Excel and
Microsoft
copy
Word was
paste.
designed for.
no. They're just like, what if we just stick a little miniature?
What if we
Excel.
slap more features in there so people will be willing to buy it
Yes.
for those
Instead of
slim
just using Google
use
Docs.
cases?
Instead of just using Google Docs.
You got to drink the Microsoft Kool-Aid, man.
Yep.
It's all about the Kool-Aid.
Yeah, it's so we recently, as in the day of recording this yesterday, had our All Souls Day mass for like alumni and stuff of the high school.
Guess when we're recording this.
Yes. Dun 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 dun. Anyway, so the original program that I had flashbacks when the project came up again was a Microsoft Word doc with tables to cover all the names. And when there is 300 names to be put in this document on 8.5 by 11 paper that has to be folded in half, I'm like, that's enough of this crap. This year, I'm doing it in InDesign, and it was way faster. Just because all you have to do to get a list or to get a text box to flow nicely into another text box is you click a couple buttons, and it's magic.
Is InDesign
Magic.
Adobe or is it?
It's Adobe.
Okay.
Yeah. It's their print layout software.
Sure.
Used for a lot of like magazines. Well, that's what I use it for. And yeah, it's a good print layout. You could do a lot of the same things in like Illustrator or Photoshop, but like InDesign is like specialized for that, for layouts and print work specifically. So it's a handy tool. There's lots of little things in there that make life easier once you learn them.
So you've printed the school.
I have not
magazine,
printed
right?
DDD. That
You have not printed King DDD?
I have not.
Why haven't you
unfortunately.
yet printed King DDD?
I haven't snuck him into a newsletter yet.
Now you need to find a way to do that. But
I've already got the
point
port-
is,
I've
my
got-
stuttering aside,
yeah.
you were in charge of the
Yes,
like,
there it was the spring edition, and now I'm currently working on the fall edition again. Which every time I do this project, it gets a little bit faster because I do things right
Okay.
off the bat.
So if you filled a page top to bottom with just circles, would that be several rounds in your magazine?
That was a
Yes.
complex setup.
Yes, yes, it was. Lovely.
Magazine full of rounds. There you go.
Had to sort of circle it around a little bit to land it, but you landed it.
Yes, I did.
He really hit the target with that one.
I had that one locked and loaded.
I'd like to turn the page on this conversation.
Speaking of turning pages,
I haven't read nearly as much as I should. I've been working on this same book for 5 years, in that I pick it up for a couple times and I forget about it for 6 months.
What is it? Clifford Goes to School?
It's The Robe, and I do
The
not
Robe.
remember who the author is.
That's
I have
Pretty dense one?
memory of
It's-
this place.
It's not like super dense. It's just I have a hard time sticking with it.
Well, life is too short to read books you don't want to read.
True, but Michelle, my sister, told me to read it, and it's her copy, and I've had it for 5 years, so I should probably...
Don't you also have my sister-in-law's copy of that book?
Correct. And by extension, your brother's book. Anyway, that tired old joke aside, I want to read it so I can give it back to her. Because disappointed sister noises are not something James wants to hear. So... which it doesn't take much. Not that she's super critical, but it's just that she loves to boss me around whenever she's around. It's fun, in a very good-natured way. So, I just really think you should do this, James. So we're doing moral high ground over something completely neutral, huh? Anyway, sister relationship aside, how is life at seminary, Riley?
Oh, it's November. November is the bad time.
Yes.
It is the time of all the work all at once. So, suffice it to say, mostly everyone at the seminary is presently on the struggle bus of getting everything done that they haven't been working ahead on the entire rest of the semester.
Like you do.
Myself included.
Mm-hmm. Basically like that at work, except for I'm not getting graded on anything and I'm getting paid for it. And the procrastinating is all being done by the people who are submitting things to me. But other than that, being completely different, it's almost exactly the same.
The future of the church does not depend upon your retention of the material.
Also, new bishop vibes.
Bishop vibes.
Suppose you and your brothers have to be quite pleased with that. We talked about it in the chat, but I don't think it's come up on the podcast.
I don't think we talked about it on the podcast.
Crookston got a new bishop, yo.
Yay.
Who's already a bishop.
Who's already a bishop, and he's in the Archdiocese of St. Paul, Minneapolis. And he, from all of the reports I have received from my acquaintances down there, he is amazing, fantastic guy. So I am very much looking forward to meeting him. I'll be coming back up to the Minnesota lands on December 3rd to be there for the installation. So
I suppose the prediction of the former administrator was correct, that it would be new bishop.
He would be out by Christmas.
Yeah.
Which kind of surprised all of us.
Yeah.
What was his installation mass, like December 6th or something like that?
Yes, the 6th.
Feast of St. Nicholas.
I get to miss 5 days of school. Well, I get to be away from school for 5 days. I'm only missing 3 days of school.
Yep.
But because it's over the weekend.
But cool beans.
But very cool beans. And then I go back to seminary for 3 days, and then I come back to Minnesota again.
Lovely. So I imagine there's going to be
I don't even have any
Riley
exams to be back for. Yeah, there will be airport picking up.
Cool. Did you by any chance manage to catch any of the last podcasts after we uploaded it?
Yes. Felix and I listened to it in the car on the way to ministry today. I enjoyed the bit. I thought it was quite funny.
I tried to make sure the record scratch wasn't too ear rapey.
It wasn't.
I think it worked out okay, because the initial sound file was just like okay, let's dial it back a little bit.
Down, buddy.
And I didn't know what to do for like a back out bumper
back in.
So it's like I said back to you guys. So I stuck the news thing in there.
Yeah, I thought it was fitting.
I was like, I could have recorded a new bumper, but it was like really late because my sister and my mom called me in quick succession immediately when I started editing the podcast. So it came
certainly not
nicely.
Certainly not planned or anything.
No. Well, no, like the original, like the software just decided, okay, I'm done recording.
No,
now.
I mean your sister and your mom calling you in quick succession.
No, that wasn't planned at all.
Oh, really? Okay.
No.
Normally those things are kind of passive-aggressive planned things.
I mean, maybe on their part, but yeah, I don't know.
They didn't talk about related subjects at all, did they?
No comment.
Aside from just making
no comment.
Girlfriend yet?
Well, my mom straight up was like, "Yeah, I just got done talking to Michelle too." I was like, "Oh, did you?"
Oh, did you?
I thought this was a confidential conversation, Michelle. Just go tell mom everything. She talked to mom first.
From my experience, you tell Michelle, you basically tell your mom.
Yeah, without question. So yeah, how's I mean, I know how life is going for Nathan, but how's life going for Nathan?
Life is going for Nathan.
Correct.
It's school, chipping away at the grindstone. We're approaching the end, and I'm scared. We are our first semester of design finals. We're about halfway, or most of the way through the semester. We've gotten very little done because the parts haven't been coming in, and we've kind of
It's hard to make chips do things when you don't have
we
chips.
don't have the parts. Yeah, no. So we're gonna have to figure out our
I like
H-bridge
chips.
design and how to make the motors go left and right and up and down and stuff, and then then we'll have to design the power block. And,
Coding.
We've got a computer engineer student on our team for that.
Nice.
He's gonna be working with like a Raspberry Pi or something like that, so we can.
Of course.
Because our final project is we're gonna have 2 motors drive the X and Y axis of a laser, and we're gonna have that laser animate little patterns like a smiley face or just ECE 37.
Oh, okay.
Whatever.
So it's almost like those, in a manner of speaking, like those laser things, like those Christmas light displays that project on the wall, kind of.
Yeah, one of those.
Sure.
So we're building that from scratch, and we also had to, because there's more people on the team than there usually on a senior design team. The guy running the program was like, okay, we need to add complexity to this. How about you make 3 different lasers that have to have different colors, and you have to press a button to
So
switch between
just
them.
do RGB
Pretty much, we got 3 different lasers, and we got to figure out how those get put together, and then how to run power to them, and how to run a switch to them, and then how to run that to the computer, so we can, just stuff. Hashing out
Problem
into-
solving.
I don't know if this is like, am I legally allowed to talk about final projects? I don't know.
I don't know.
it's the thing I'm doing. Not telling you not uploading any blueprints or anything, so I guess it should be fine.
Yeah.
But it's been pretty cool. I'm on the one of the guys on my senior design team is actually our grand knight at the Newman Center. Knights
Oh,
of
you're in the
Columbus
same
Council.
team with John?
I'm in the team with John.
Nice.
So that's pretty cool. There's a guy I know on there. It's like, hey.
Hey. I think he mentioned that to me, actually. I forgot about it.
But no, it's going, and I'm feeling sorely underqualified. But
Sounds like being a senior to me.
right,
Welcome to real life.
right,
You will
It
feel
feels-
underqualified until like 6 months into your first job.
pretty much.
That's just how it goes.
But yeah,
C'est la vie.
that's Nathan. I went home last weekend too, to visit family and stuff, just because I hadn't been in a while, and also Dad was remodeling a lot of the house. I've talked about this. So, did we talk about this last week on the podcast? About how I helped him hang up, or did I just talk to you about this?
I think
otherwise?
I remember you and I visiting about this when you got home,
Right.
which would have been after we recorded last week.
Okay. Anyway, so Dad's trying to get the house re-insulated because it was all crappy fiberglass stuff, and it's just nasty, or just like wool or whatever. But there's like a regulation thickness the foam has to be when they spray it in, and the roof like trusses, the beams holding the roof up are a certain length long that are shorter than the thickness the foam needs to be. So I spent most of last Saturday tacking up, cutting to length and tacking up a bunch of boards to help, bridge that gap so we can actually spray foam and then hang sheetrock on it.
In another scary incidence of our families doing the exact same thing to their houses for some reason, that's what Adam and my dad were doing last week too. in
Well,
the
they're
in the
finishing the
garage.
garage,
Yeah,
right?
they're finishing the garage. Yeah.
Oh, sure. But yeah.
Are they even distinct families anymore?
Not really.
Well,
It's kind
as
of
far as two
blending.
members are concerned, no. Yeah, they're
yeah.
well, two members who became one flesh through marriage. And
Oh,
such,
yes.
you know.
Before I just come up with some hackneyed transition,
Speaking of becoming one flesh through marriage, where the Palladium
congratulations to listener Faith on passing the last exam she needs for nursing school today. That was the thing. So if I heard that correctly, I was mostly paying attention. She was talking to John, so it's not on me to get that right. But
I think Riley's tried to transition to the actual
I
episode
have
twice.
twice.
Now.
right. But just throw that out there.
We're going long in the banter bit.
Well, I started recording and then left it recording for a while before Riley got ready, so we're good.
Regardless.
Speaking of congratulations, we're finally starting the episode. We're the Palladium Papists. I'm James.
I'm Nathan.
And I am Riley.
What edition of the pod is this today, Riley?
We're doing some novel ideas today about Jonathan.
Speaking of Jenny Page. Okay, that didn't ring a bell at all. Okay.
Speaking of, we're
Novel.
doing a novel ideas on Jonathan Strange and Mr Norell.
Oh, a novel idea.
All right.
Very good.
Neither of us have read that, so
No, you haven't.
better carry us hard.
Yes, this will be an interesting little episode.
Oh boy.
Because, this book is like a very unique kind of book. And it's by Susanna Clarke, who, one of her other books, Piranesi, has really been gaining some traction in the Catholic community for just being a really good book, which I haven't read. I do own.
I've heard that name dropped now and again.
I have the, ebook, but I haven't gotten around to reading it yet. But I read this book of hers before I had ever heard of Piranesi, so I said, I know that author. Maybe this book is a little more interesting. Because I do have my criticisms of this book, but I think it is worth talking about for some interesting and unique things it does.
Sure.
So, the setting for this book is kind of a alternative history in Napoleonic England. So we're talking like turn of the 19th century.
Roughly the same time frame as Tale of Two Cities. Well, no, actually 50 years later.
We start in 1806, so not exactly.
Yeah.
So we're following the tales of one Mr. Segundus, and a Mr. Honeyfoot, who are both magicians, quote unquote, because they don't actually know how to do magic. In fact, nobody in England these days can do magic. It is a discipline that has been lost in terms of practical application, and now the only thing really left is theoretical magicians. So people get together and, have their books and their discussions about magic and what it really ought to be, but it's kind of just hailing back to a bygone era of the kind of high Middle Ages when magic ruled England, and, the king was, the notorious Raven King, who kind of was one of the most prolific, in fact, the most prolific magician to have ever lived. And he was kind of immortal and all this magical stuff, and he ruled over England, and everything was magical and cool.
Mm-hmm.
But in the present day 1806, that is no longer the case. Now, we have enter Mr. Norell, who is another magician, but he's got this enormous collection of books, and some of the other York Society of Magicians are interested in him because of that. He does not participate in their meetings. He just kind of lives on his estate and does his own thing. But, he's got one of the largest collections of magical books in the world. So people are interested in him because of that. And they go to his house and they tour around his books, and he doesn't let them touch any of them because his books are his favorite little thing. And they're like, well, you should come on down to the York Society of Magicians and join our group and have discussions with us. He's like, nah, I've got no time for you posers. And they're like, what do you mean? He's like, well, you see, I'm a practical magician.
Not a theoretical, but a practical one. Those are
Right.
unheard of these days.
And he looks down upon all of the theoretical magicians as,
Pretenders.
grandstanding posers that don't actually.
He's a blue collar magician who just he gets down to business.
Oh,
and
he's
actually does the
definitely not a
work.
blue collar magician
Okay.
at all. I mean, nobody of any importance in this book is blue collar.
Fair
We're,
enough.
we're talking about 1800s
High society.
English high society.
He's a genteel man.
So he does some magical miracles to prove that he is in fact in possession of magic. And the British government goes wild because we can use this guy to defeat Napoleon. Because, they don't particularly care for that guy.
Because Napoleon doing Napoleon things.
Yes, doing Napoleon things.
Little man take over much of Europe.
So he packs up and moves down to London from Yorkish area. And joins in the war effort and is generally having a grand old time doing stuff.
Stick it to the French.
A
Apparently.
point of importance is that along the way he meets a nice young lady named Lady Pole, whom he decides to marry. Hence the attempted transition earlier.
Oh.
There you go.
And it turns out that Lady Pole falls very, very ill. Well, she falls ill first, and Mr. Norell is contacted to come in and do something magical about it, because the doctors can't make anything work. So she gets sick and dies, and he says, nobody has attempted to do the bringing someone back from the dead thing for a while, but I'm the best magician ever, so I'm going to do it. And so
because
he does.
No way
bringing
this could
somebody
go
from
wrong.
The dead is always a great way to start your story.
Particularly
No.
in fiction.
There's no way this could go wrong, and there's no way this will catalyze the events for the entire rest of the book.
Does his buddy turn into a suit of armor or something?
No, not quite.
But he's a
But-
magician helping with the war effort.
It is true. But, so he pulls it off, but the price he has to pay, he surrenders a piece of Lady Pole. He has to cut off her finger and give it to this fairy that he uses some of the power of to complete the ritual. And so Lady Pole is miraculously revived, and the whole world is abuzz with the fact that this has been done. But Lady Pole seems a little different. She's
Fair.
a little more. She's
Minus
a little more
finger.
distant and cold, physically cold. And so, something seems to be up, but nobody exactly knows what. I mean, to be sure, being married and being revived from the dead a couple days later is enough excitement for any upstanding Brit for a lifetime.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
So they figure, she's just recovering from this harrowing incident. Meanwhile, we have Mr. Strange, who is kind of this headstrong, budding young magic user. Well, he's interested in magic. But, like many others, he doesn't have the practical use of it.
Does he have
But
to go train with the ancient
he
one
does-
and fight
he does.
Dormammu and stuff?
No, not that one.
Different Strange? Got it.
Different Strange. He does go train with the Mr. Norell.
Uh-huh.
And
Nothing wrong with his fingers, though.
nothing wrong with his.
That's Paul,
He d-
Lady Paul.
He's not a... Yep, that's Lady Pole's. And so he goes and, gets in touch with Mr. Norell and kind of becomes quickly his equal in magic. He's extremely talented and has been at this for like a couple of years, whereas Mr. Norell's been at this for his entire life. And, Mr. Strange is strangely just as, good at magic as he is after such a short period of time.
That's prodigious lad magic.
Lad magic.
That did not come
Lad
out.
magic?
It's just sort of
Mad
tripped
logic?
over and on my tongue.
Right,
on the way
we've
out.
got some lad magic. We're British. Bit shady, isn't it?
Bit shady, innit? I got my magic license right here.
Magical mad lads.
I got my license for magic right here. And so there becomes a conflict between the two of them because, Mr. Strange is kind of this prodigy and learning very quickly without much effort, and Mr. Norell is jealous. And so he's kind of petty towards his pupil/peer, but nonetheless, Strange is committed to maintaining that relationship. He's purposefully humble about referring to Mr. Norell before he does things because, he's his master. He wants to avoid the conflict and just be agreeable.
Grant him the deference as befits one's mentor.
Good on him. And we also have one of the servants of the Pohl family, Mr. Stephen Black, who is an African slave that has been, put into the service of their family. And he, too, has kind of come into contact with this fairy, this gentleman with the thistledown hair, as he is so often referred. And Lady Pohl and he go off to these balls at night. But these balls occur in a sort of supernatural place, and it's very grim and lifeless and creepy. And so, as they walk out of the house and they do some magical journeys and things, and they arrive at these balls where they are forced to dance because they have kind of come under the compulsion of the gentleman with the thistledown hair.
Mm-hmm. Something's up with this guy.
This guy is slurping the life out of them slowly but surely, and they kind of become more distant and removed from the world as they have more and more of their existence there.
How did Mr. Black come to be in contact with this fairy?
Well, the fairy has taken a particular interest in him, and since he was summoned for the revival thing, he's just kind of about. He's around, so he thinks
the fairy's like, this guy.
This man is especially well suited for things that I will introduce later.
Sure.
So, yes, they go to Portugal, Mr. Strange does, and do war efforts there. And he kind of has a harrowing experience in Portugal, just kind of being more of a foot soldier and less doing magic from oceans away.
Sure.
He's kind of on the ground and in the thick of it. So he's much more kind of grounded and in the world and willing to really understand and sympathize with things rather than sit in the magician's high tower like Mr. Norell is. And so eventually they kind of push Napoleon's forces out of there and resolve the conflict. And once the third act kind of takes place between Venice and back in England. Mm-hmm. And they're trying to, essentially they're trying to figure out what's going on with the two people, Lady Pohl and Mr. Black, who are seeming to be withdrawn and kind of distant and departed from the world.
Something's up with these two. They don't seem quite right.
These folks, they are shadows of their former selves. And so they have one of the earlier recurring characters, Vinculus, has this prophecy that he is in charge of delivering to Jonathan Strange and Mr. Norell. That is, the nameless slave shall be a king in a strange country. The nameless slave, quite strange country. The nameless slave, seemingly referring to Mr. Black. And so we learn that the gentleman's plan is to, usurp the King of England and put Stephen Black in his place. And of course, Stephen Black, being the humble, good servant that he is, and a generally good-hearted gentleman, wants nothing to do with that. Mm-hmm. He's like, Just a simple servant, sir.
I'm not all about this
I
coup
don't-
stuff.
But I don't want to be king. I'd rather
I'd rather sing.
just sing. Stop that. Stop that. There's not going to be any singing while I'm here.
Yep.
But that's the plan here. And Mr. Strange has come in contact with the gentleman's attempts to do that at various points. They were kind of hanging out at the king's castle, and, he falls into this trance, and they march into this snowy wood in the middle of times it's not supposed to be snowing. And he's like, this smells like magic. So he uses his magical prowess to break out of the illusion with Mr. Black, but it's starting to become clear that, the gentleman is making his move. And so they have not exactly a battle, I would say, but they kind of do magical things in a very British way. So it's kind of like, a gentleman's kerfuffle of polite words exchanged, and
All right, we'll call it a draw.
all right then. I suppose I'll
Just
have
magical
to-
insults.
ask you to politely please leave my people alone. And I will leave how that happens to your reading pleasure,
Care for a bit of snuff, sir?
because there's not it's not like a super exciting climactic ending, but it's just kind of uniquely British is how I describe it.
Sure.
Sure.
That's kind of the flavor of the whole book. It's just so it revolves around that theming of late 19th century Britain, but it's like applying it to a fantasy archetype, which, hitherto was sort of absorbed by Tolkien. Like,
Mhm.
Sure.
the entire fantasy archetype was kind of patterns itself off of Lord of the Rings. But this book, it has a lot of similar flavor elements. Like,
Oh, sure.
the world is being explored as it's being created in the Tolkien kind of. That's how he writes. He's exploring the world with you as he's creating it, as he's writing. And a lot of that feeling comes out in this book as well. It's like, even though it's a very definite world in terms of the historical narrative, there's a lot of
She doesn't exist
Magical.
in the early
Rules and
1800s.
such.
right. There's a lot of magical realm also that's going on. And
She being
so-
the author, I mean.
Right. Suzanne Collins does not live in 18th century England or Portugal or Venice, but, does a lot of historical research into like the Peninsular Campaign and all that sort of thing. So
Yeah.
it's fairly like geographically accurate when it's in the real world. But there is, of course, lots of magical things going on. So it has that in common with like other fantasy archetypes. But it also like has this nearly plodding pace, is how I would describe it. It's very almost pedantic in the way that it traverses its own story, and does so in that polite British conversational way of high society England. It takes its sweet time about getting where it's going. And that's something that, while I personally don't favor, I can kind of appreciate.
By the way, it seems we're moving into cool stuff.
We have
should
moved
say
into cool stuff.
Okay. So it just kind of resolved with them having a fisticuffs.
A
with
gentleman's
words and,
chat.
How exactly did
Yes.
things pan out with Lady Pole and such? And
There's a kind of... It almost ends in an aporia. Like, the book ends where the conflict isn't directly resolved in front of you.
Sure.
You don't exactly know how things turn out entirely. You do get to see some of it.
Sure.
Like, they found a new magical academy for people to come and learn and So, like, the rise of practical magic is coming back in England, and, you know, the servants, the gentleman is defeated, but we don't know if the people go back to normal.
What manner of being is he? Is that ever addressed?
Some
it's
sort of
never
fey being.
directly stated, but he's presumed to be a fairy.
Mm. And does this book exist as like a one-off, or is it in a series?
Yeah, it's very much a one-off.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Anyway, I interrupted the cool stuff discussion for that check on the resolution. You can continue with the cool stuff if you would like.
Yeah, that's one of the interesting things, is that it was, you know, such a lack of resolution.
Sure.
Which is something you very rarely see in that archetype of stories, that you usually you end with the bad guy defeated and the heroes walking off into the sunset.
Then Lord of the Rings ended 7 times in the same book.
Right. So you have that kind of aporia where nothing is really, really resolved, which is interesting, different, and I respect, even though it's not like my personal favorite thing.
It's not the most satisfying. It's
inherently meant to be unsatisfying.
Yep.
Or, I mean, what it's really meant to do is encourage you to kind of imagine it yourself.
Sure.
How you would like it to, how you think things should proceed from there.
Kind of an Inception ending, where does the top tip over? I don't know.
Yeah, kind of leave you speculating and wanting more rather than over-explaining things.
Which is an interesting way of generating engagement with a novel.
Mm-hmm.
Especially one that's not part of a series.
Yeah, after you set it down, you're like, okay, so based off of this stuff that's indicated earlier in the book, what conclusions might we draw about this somewhat ambiguous ending? That's a creative choice I respect as well.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, you know, once again, the pacing of it is not really for everybody. Like,
sure,
it very much takes its time about getting where it's going, and there are several points where you're just like, man, I'm really not being drawn through this book, and you're like, wait, I'm not supposed to be being drawn through this book. It kind of feels like it's meant to evoke the feeling of you standing in a parlor with, you know, several pretentious people, that some of whom you don't really like, but you have to politely sit there and listen to them ramble for 30 minutes about their problems because it's polite and you invited them to your house.
Sounds like a family reunion.
That's not my experience of family reunions, but
you
I have a
unique-
very weird situation when it comes to family reunions.
Yeah.
So I'm glad of that. I'm proud of that.
Yes, yes. I mean, my family's fun too, but
not in the formal get together.
yeah, it's not really high society stuff as much as just like random tractor stuff. I have no clue what they're talking about.
Random tractor stuff, I think, is North Dakota high society.
Yeah,
pretty much.
Mm-hmm.
Anyhow.
Anyway. So yeah, there's lots of kind of political, societal maneuvering in the first 2 acts, where Mr. Norell is trying to get his foothold in London, being a Yorkshireman and not really having any connections there. And, you know, it's just like filled with much society.
Then after he had to carve his niche into society all on his own, he gets all indignant that Mr. Strange is shooting past him in his own wheelhouse. And
right. As Mr. Strange kind of does have some connections in London, even if he's not a Londoner himself, but he's one of those kind of young and trendy guys who knows a bit and is not locked himself away in Hurtview Abbey for his entire life.
Sure.
What was the name of the author you said?
Susanna Clarke.
Oh, because at one point you said Suzanne Collins. I was like, wait a minute.
That's a different name.
That's a different person.
Right. I mean, they're
That's the
similar.
person that wrote The Hunger Games.
Like similar
That's
sounding
okay.
names.
There you go. No.
Yeah.
I have been like concentrating so hard on not saying Suzanne Collins
Yeah.
that I ended up saying Suzanne Collins.
The subconscious brain is a funny thing.
So I do that whenever I talk to people about this book. I'm like, yeah,
It's Suzanne Clarke.
Clarke.
Collins.
Yes. And like the book has received a lot of, high praise from people like Neil Gaiman, who wrote American Gods, and some other like high profile authors because of the artistic choices in there. So I mean,
very high society art sort of thing.
Yeah, it's certainly not my vibe. I kind of loathe the pretentious British culture and kind of sympathize more with the British poor, the weirdos of Monty Python more than I do the Downton Abbeys.
Yeah, or the Pride and Prejudices, or anything in that ilk.
Yeah.
Now add zombies to Pride and Prejudice, and maybe we're going to this.
It's very much not my vibe, but it also has, it's interesting.
It has its
writing.
merits and can be discussed.
It's you see, it's because it's high class, that means you are smart for reading it.
Correct. Some of those, like, high society Austen books are actually well worth reading.
Correct.
Oh,
yeah, they're considered literary classics for a reason.
So
doesn't mean I have to like them.
Beyond the general theming, is there like a commentary or something that it's making on the British high society of the late 1900s? Or
No,
early
definitely.
1900s, late 19th?
I wouldn't say that it is trying to comment on it.
It's simply the
beyond-
setting.
Beyond
Yeah.
just having a setting that's unique?
I mean, the writing style is actually a pastiche of the diction and syntax of the time.
Very neat.
So
I like it when people put a little research in, and it may seem weird and janky to read when you're reading older speech patterns.
I want to show you something. SHEW show.
But it also just makes it feel more authentic than using...
It makes the Red Badge of Courage almost impossible to read.
Sure.
Lots of apostrophes. Anyway.
One of the things I would say that it does kind of comment on is the cultural differences between northern and southern England.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
You represent those by the two main characters.
Because up in York, you're lucky to even have a London.
Yeah. It's kind of...
We just lived in all the ground.
We used to have to live in corridor. Oh, we used to dream of living in corridor. No, but it kind of talks about the northern vibe as being more reserved and kind of, I don't know, calculated isn't the right word, but it's like
Just kind of introspective or
maybe
isolated almost.
And
introspective is
maybe a
is
bit
good
more,
word.
what's the word I'm looking for? Not savvy, but shrewd, perhaps.
Yeah.
But then in London, it's more society.
Society.
Oh, hell, society!
It's kind of outgoing and venture
We live in a
capitalist.
society.
It's kind of, they're all go-getters because that's just the
Laissez-faire. The mindset is the grindset, you see.
Oh yes, I clearly embody the Sigma male grindset.
Sigma, of course, being the Greek letter denoting. If anyone in England is listening, and we know you are,
They are.
cheers.
Cheers, mate.
Jeez, mate. Let's see what else. It does kind of flip the script on one respect of that divide too, where it's like, in our history, like the northern Englanders are kind of the industrial and cold, calculated, logical ones, and the southerners are more romanticized and kind of free-spirited. Whereas it kind of flips that in this and makes, at least in, the high medieval period of this timeline in the book, is like the height of magic in the entire history of the world. So
I mean, in considering
everything was mystical and whimsical, and magic ruled the land, and everyone was in it in the north.
Mm-hmm. So they were the center of the magical revolution before the
rather than the Industrial Revolution.
Interesting. It's interesting when you add that little bit of fiction to history. Changes like perspective and context.
a different sort of access to more power than ever before.
Mm-hmm.
Interesting.
Also, did anything about the Raven King guy ever come back, or is he just a piece
he
of
does
world-building
show up
history?
and do Deus Ex Machina things in the end.
Because you say he's immortal, but he's gone, but he's not dead.
Yeah, he's gone. He's just gone. He does.
Yeah, I was like, is one of our main characters secretly him, or what?
Well,
No,
that's
just...
part of the mystery and intrigue throughout the book, is that this sort of prophecy is about, and you're trying to puzzle out if it is one or the other of the people.
Either the guy who's lived in his tower his whole life, or the guy who's unusually good at magic, or what?
Right. You start out thinking that Mr. Norell is really like the Raven King brought back. And then when Mr. Strange, you start to pick apart all of Mr. Norell's flaws and idiosyncrasies. Mm-hmm. And you start to realize it's probably not him. And then they bring in Mr. Strange. And you oh, this guy's got to be it. And then they slowly start to show his flaws and all of the reasons why he can't be it either. So
sure. Because that's actually what I was trying to puzzle through as you were discussing. It's I wonder if this will come in later. So yeah, that's pretty fun.
Sometimes things are background details, and that's okay.
Yeah.
As satisfying as it is to have a narrative where every piece fits together in a nice puzzle at the end.
It's also nice to have lore and background details that aren't important, but are just
this is
there
the
to make
context in
world
which
feel
this
lived
exists, and that's the extent to which this detail is relevant.
Mm-hmm.
Not everything has to be a Charles Dickens book where every single character comes together at the end for some reason. But yeah, I respect that.
And also, one of the fun little things about this is the extensive use of footnotes.
Oh boy!
They'll go and talk about a historical magical text that someone makes a reference of, and there'll be a half-page long footnote about
oh my gosh.
the context of that thing. Mm-hmm. And so
it's like reading
that's
the Bible.
another a precedent-setting thing. There's another book series that I really like. I forget what the name of the series is, but the first book is The Amulet of Samarkand, and it's I think it's Ptolemy's Gate or something is the name of the series. But that
I've heard of Ptolemy's Gate.
Series also uses that footnote thing. It uses it to a more humorous effect.
Sure.
Because it's from the point of view of the Ginny who is talking about it, and he's kind of a sassy guy. So
kind of a little bit, yeah, okay. Just has to make asides.
A little bit like Lemony Snicket.
A little
chiming
bit.
in with whatever he.
Although instead of footnotes, he just straight up puts pages worth of
right.
This is a letter I'm writing to somebody in secret in this book.
It's so sad that nobody will have read this far, so it certainly will get to you. Anyway,
that's fun.
That's pretty cool.
It establishes that kind of fantasy writing trope.
Nice.
Nice indeed.
Anything else before we get into the analysis?
I don't think so.
You said there were issues you had with it. Were those just primarily the stuffy Britishness of it?
Stuffy Britishness and pacing.
Got it.
Which is more of a taste thing than something objectively wrong with it.
Right. Okay.
Right.
Because I was like, are we gonna have to hash out some theology missteps they make, or what? No, it's just.
I just kind of turned off my theologian brain when I was reading this, because it was very much not trying to make any such point.
No.
And I can tell that. So, if a book does try to make such a point, my theologian brain will be turned on, and I will.
Oh yeah.
I will make my criticisms of it for that. But as far as I can tell, it's not trying to say anything of that nature. So
Sure.
Well, as we move on to truth, what is it trying to say? We're doing transcendental.
Yeah.
Truth.
oh
Yeah. Yeah.
yes. I think ultimately what it's trying to say is be careful what you wish for in a 900-page roundabout way. Because everyone's desire, at least the main two characters' desire, but most of the ancillary characters, is to restore magic in England. That's what we're all about. That's what we're after.
And oh boy, magic comes back.
What Mr. Norell does to accomplish that is some very, inadvisable things like raising the dead.
Mm-hmm.
And the consequences of doing that are,
What you put in the
severe.
ground isn't the same as what come back out of it.
And it kind
Don't
of
do it, Stotch. Anyway.
it kind of evokes the vague vibes of those old European fairy tales where it's like you do a deal with a fairy to get some magic, but he'll be after your firstborn child or whatever,
Oh, you haven't played that
There's-
yet. Never mind.
It'll be after your wife.
Exactly.
Sometimes dead is better.
But it's like it's because you've got this.
Yeah, it's
Very
very
who's-
much in that European fairy tale style,
Right. Where
Just
magic
in a-
has a
in a-
price.
in a much longer form than
Right.
fairy tales.
But much longer and more well thought out.
In a
very
sort of
19th century.
archetype of a deal with the devil, but play out a little
Pretty much.
differently than the traditional way that it goes.
If you make a deal with the devil, all your friends will have to go and do dancing at night and never sleep. And
You ever
they
dance
will
with the devil in the
slowly-
pale
and they will
moonlight?
something like that. Don't raise the dead. Don't try that.
Don't
Please
do
don't.
that. No.
Do not.
Do not.
These
It's
things are not for man.
It's not your job. Don't do
It's not a pretty picture. Don't like doing it.
How about you not?
it. Don't just read books. Go try the thing.
Sure. Yeah, because you've got Mr. Strange who actually, after working with Mr. Norell, theoretically, and with his books and stuff and the magic in the background, he gets his boots in the ground and he gets his boots dirty and it's like, oh, this is what real life is like.
Mm-hmm.
And he still shows deference and respect for the man who trained him, even if that's not necessarily reciprocated.
Well, Mr. Norell's kind of finicky and high-strung. He does
True.
come around eventually and realize that he's being a doofus. But for most of his life, he hasn't had to contend with anyone else. He hasn't been forced to have a peer-to-peer relationship with anyone before, so he's
To think
kind of
outside of his own needs
learning how
and
to do that
wants.
for the first time as an adult,
Which can
is-
be pretty messy.
which can be messy. This is why having childhood friends is a good thing,
Mm-hmm.
so you can learn how to be a human being.
The real social skills were the friends we made along the way.
Sometimes you just need somebody to cut all the hair off of the top of your head so you can just make a ridiculously tall wig to...
That's a different...
Oh, right. Yeah. That image is just stuck in my mind for some reason. Any other truths in...
I think that hits the truth points.
All right. How about goodness?
Arabella Strange is very good.
Oh, yeah?
She's another one of those people who gets taken by the thistledown-haired gentleman, Doctor Strange's wife, Mr. Strange's wife. But she's kind of like this
XY axis sort of a thing.
steadfast, stand by your side kind of lady. And
Stand by your man.
Stand by me.
he's kind of this happy-go-lucky, kind of head in the clouds,
I'm a
kinda-
bunny.
dreamer kind of guy.
Yeah.
And she kind of grounds him and keeps him on Earth, and takes his side when he gets in kerfuffles with people, and
Head in the clouds, that one.
and Jonathan Strange reciprocates that when she's taken by never losing faith that he can get her back. And he ultimately can't for reasons that I won't spoil. But
Oh,
More to
but he.
find if you
more
choose to read it.
Oh.
But he wants to. He just has a vocation.
Ah,
Oh,
It's not a vocation to anything supernatural, but it's
Oh.
just
right.
he has a vocation to be a magician.
That's
And
Take
he
that
is-
as
he
you will.
has to do magician things,
I'm
Or
married
else.
to my work.
or else. Well, he's not married to his work. He just has to sacrifice things to maintain the order in the world.
uh-huh.
Kind of like Spider-Man.
Yes,
Uh,
with great power.
any other good things?
There's not a lot of other like
Standout examples.
standout examples of good. I would
Sure.
say Mr. Black is quite good.
What,
He's content to be a servant, even though he like recognizes that his race is generally looked down upon by people in England.
And this being a couple decades where in our timeline the slavery was abolished in England.
Mm-hmm.
But he was still very much a lower class of citizen.
Yep.
And yet he was like the most well trained in polite society that a servant could be.
Mm-hmm.
So he knew and could execute properly, all of the demands of the society, but he was still kind of rejected on the basis of his skin color. And he recognizes all of that, but doesn't have these grandiose ambitions. He just has a servant's heart. And so he, in spite of all of his trials and challenges, and, he's offered the chance to be the King of England. If he had complied, it would have happened. If he had wanted it, it could have been his. But he was content to be who he wanted to be.
Beauty.
If it's your thing, the writing style can be quite charming. Once again, it's one of those things that just kind of isn't my taste, but it has an interesting, it adds an objective flavor to the story that really sets it in the historical fiction kind of thing.
Sure.
And if you vibe with it, you vibe with it. If you don't,
That's
you
okay.
don't.
Some of the fantastic elements of this book are really well written and kind of give you that kind of charming ancient, you're walking through a wood in the middle of England and there's fairy rings and bridges between worlds, and you just kind of get transported into this it's kind of a grimmer fairy tale, but that's kind of the aesthetic it gives off.
Sure.
Kind of a grim
A
fairy
gothic-
tale fantasy
a
vibe.
gothic fairy tale. So yeah, it really evokes that sense of otherworldliness and magical character.
Sure.
Which is kind of what you want from a fantasy story. So
Yeah,
that's pretty cool.
it's not like gleaming armor knights with brave chivalry and
No.
all of that stuff and
Hello.
fireballs and lightning bolts and that kind of traditional
It's
magical
not
stuff.
high
but
fantasy.
it's
it's
not
just-
high fantasy.
It's just
Just
fantasy.
high society fantasy.
The definition of high fantasy takes place on not Earth. So
So this is
it does
a
not necessarily involve the particular magic system.
so it's
that it
a
employs.
sort of it's sort of more towards a Harry Potter-ish sort of real
it's,
world,
It's,
but-
a very Englishy magic,
Mhm.
as is the case with the rest of it.
but for once it's not a metaphor for school.
Right. That's Japan. We're not dealing with Japan here.
Yeah. Anything else?
Nope.
We good?
Unity.
Oh, right.
There's a whole other transcendental
Englishness.
English.
British.
It's very British.
It's rather British, isn't it?
It is rather British.
Sorry,
Yeah.
bloody British.
It's bringing magic back to England. That's kind of the key thing, that key theme that binds everything together.
I suppose
It's
it's
still
like
bloody freezing on my flat.
I suppose as a story, it's like the intention of the story is to kind of take historical England and bring back some of the mystery, some of the magicalness that you used to get with like King Arthur, with the Lord of the Ringsy stuff. That it's like.
Meanwhile,
bringing
Grumbles in
magic back.
Ireland.
I'm bringing magic back.
So is there like a magic Irish potato famine in this world?
None of that is ever explicitly... Well, the Irish potato famine is after this.
True.
So
True. Huh.
we haven't gotten there yet.
I see.
Tune in for the sequel. Doctor Strange and the Potato Famine.
Anyhow.
If people want more potato famines, where can they go?
Well, thanks for listening to the Blaney Papers. You can listen to us on Spotify, Stitcher, Google Podcasts, and Apple Podcasts. Follow us on Facebook and Twitter at Palpapus. If you have any questions, comments, concerns, or complaints, or requests for directions to Ellis Island, or suggestions for future episodes, email us at palladiumpapus@gmail.com.
You must be a little bit out of it. It's right there.
A little bit out. Yes, I was trying to shoehorn something in. It didn't quite work.
I gave you like
A call back to 3 weeks ago.
Yeah.
right.
So we will catch you guys next week. Later.
Bye.
See ya.